you do not have to put units. If they say, how many milliliters will you give, just write 10. Don't write 10 ml, because that says, how many milliliters will you give? 10 milliliters. You see what I'm saying? You don't need these units. You just need the numbers. All right, and write the numbers. Don't write 10. Okay. Any questions? All right, see you tomorrow at what time? 9, bright and early. I have an hour long to get home. Who has longer? How long? Oh. Are you staying in or are you leaving? I'm leaving.
It isn't really.
Carpool.
It isn't really a whole hour though, is it?
What's that?
It's not really a whole hour because I'm spring.
Okay.
Everybody gets to come.
All right, we're going to start out with crutches, canes, and walkers. On page 17. Any questions? Probably just went home and slept.
Yeah, we did.
Not much came to mind. Okay. Crutches, canes, and walkers. One of the major areas of human functioning is locomotion. And so they do test it. So certain things show up on boards with greater frequency than what you might expect them to. And locomotion is one of those. And so to test that, they test casts, traction, canes, crutches, walkers, things that were really probably not emphasized in your school much, were they? That wasn't a major emphasis, I doubt. But on boards, people will always say, like, well, I was surprised at how many things I had about traction or about casts or about things like that. And that's because one of the 8 areas of human functioning they test is locomotion. So you do have to know some of these things. Plus, they're also really good areas for patient teaching because a lot of boards is teaching. What do you teach? What's your goal? What's the teaching? And then it's also risk reduction, as far as reducing risk to skin, risk for immobility problems and that. So let's talk about crutches. The first thing is how do you measure crutches? The reason why they want you to know how to measure crutches correctly is for risk reduction so that you don't cause nerve damage. The first thing is the length of the crutch. How do you measure the length of the crutch? It's 2 to 3 finger widths below the anterior axillary fold to a point lateral to and slightly in front of the foot. Now, what they'll do is they'll say something like, you see an RN or an LPN or an aide measuring a person for crutches. You notice they're doing all of the following. What would you correct? And you have to pick something where they're doing it wrong. Or they'll say which one shows the right, and you have to pick out the correct. The deal is they'll often write sets of instructions where you're measuring from the wrong point to the wrong point. For example, they'll say, to get the length of a crutch, you measure from the axilla. You don't measure from the axilla. You measure 2 to 3 finger widths below the anterior axillary fold. So they'll give you the wrong upper point. Or they'll say, you measure to the heel. You don't measure to the heel. You measure to the little toe. You don't measure to the little toe. In other words, you don't measure to any landmark on the foot. You measure to a point lateral to and slightly in front of the foot. So if any of the answers say axilla or any landmark on your foot, they are incorrect. They are wrong. Rule them out. So any instructions with a landmark on the foot or say axilla, they're wrong instructions for how long the crutches need to be. Letter B, the next thing you have to measure is the hand grip. The hand grip can be adjusted up and down. And what you need to know there is when the hand grips are properly placed, the angle of elbow flexion will be about 30 degrees. So those are the 2 things that they're all about with crutch measuring. The length and the angle of elbow flexion when you put the hand grip properly placed. Those are the only 2 things you need to know about measuring crutches. The next part of it is how to teach crutch gaits, because you're supposed to be able to educate people on how to walk with crutches. There are 4 crutch gaits, 2-point, 3-point, 4-point, and swing through. Now, how do you teach each of them? 2-point gait is rather simple. These names are really obvious. You shouldn't forget these names because these names tell you exactly what you're doing, with one exception maybe. In 2-point gait, pretend my arms are crutches, all right? In 2-point gait, you move a crutch and the opposite foot together, followed by the other crutch and the other foot together. And so you kind of walk like this. 2 things, 2 things, 2 things, 2 things, 2 things. So it goes 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Well, if you were going 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, what would you name the gait? 2-point. Doesn't it make sense?
Yeah.
Because in 2-point, you're moving two things together. What two things? A crutch and the opposite. It's always crutch and opposite. So that's real simple to teach. In 3-point gait, you're moving two crutches and the bad leg together. Two crutches and the bad leg. So how many things is that? 3. So it goes, if this is my bad leg, it goes 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. So what would you call a crutch gait that goes 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1? 3-point, seems logical. So what are you moving together in 2-point? How many are you moving together in 2-point? 2. How many are you moving together in 3-point? 3. So how many do you move together in 4-point? 4. No. Because that would be, what would that look like? That would look like this. Right?
Yeah.
And if you could do that, you don't need crutches. So obviously that falls apart. So you move two things together in 2-point, you move three things together in 3-point, but in 4-point, you move everything separately. Because how many things do you have? Well, you have 2 legs and 2 crutches. 2 plus 2 equals 4. So how does 4-point go? Well, 4-point goes like this. You move a crutch, any crutch, just pick a crutch. But once you move that crutch, now you're locked in. Your sequence is now locked in. Because now what must you move? The opposite foot followed by the other crutch followed by the other foot. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4-point gait. It's very slow, but very stable.
What kind of imagery is that used for?
We'll be talking about that on the next page because that's exactly the next thing we need to tell you. Because you do have to know that. Okay. Swing through, on the other hand, is for non-weight bearing. For example, amputations where you can't bear weight on a stump. Or whenever they say non-weight bearing. And what swing through is you've seen it. I can't illustrate it because I don't really have crutches. But it's where you can't bear weight on this leg. And so you plant the crutches, all right? And then you swing through, you see, and then you never put this leg down. And you've seen them, they kind of go whoosh, whoosh, and they just follow.
Father-in-law's missing a leg.
And that's exactly what they do, and they just swing it. And it actually can be really fast. Have you seen people go pretty fast with this? They just move, and that leg never touches down. Okay? So when do you use swing through? Non-weight bearing. I did have a student who called me after she took her test, and she says, that crutch stuff was on there, but what you taught me didn't help. Oh, okay. Rather accusatory, but hey, whatever. And I said, well, why didn't it help? And she said, well, you were telling us about the different crutch gaits, and she said, the one they gave me, nothing you taught us helped. And I said, well, what did they tell you? She said, well, he had an amputation. So I didn't know which crutch gait to use. And I said, well, what do you mean you didn't know? She says, well, 2-point wouldn't work, 3-point would. She says, and then swing throughs for non-weight bearing. And I said, well, amputation, you can't bear. Do you see what I'm saying? Why do people make those kinds of mistakes on test? They're not thinking. Why are they not thinking? They're anxious. And they're not taking steps to manage that anxiety. Now, I will never tell a student, when you take this test, don't be anxious. That's stupid. You can't tell a person not to be anxious because they're going to be anxious as whatever they're going to be. But what you have to teach them is how to what? Manage the anxiety. And she wasn't managing the anxiety. And I was thinking, but if you think about it, could you really do 3-point? 1, 2, 3. You can't do that with an amputation. You have to do swing through. Now, what if they said they had an amputation with a prosthetic device? Could you bear weight? Yeah. Okay. Letter D on the next page, which is what you asked, which is when do they use these? In what situations do they use these? You also have to know that. Now, this is easy Because there's a little saying we often use, and that's even for even, odd for odd. Even for even, odd for odd. Now, how does that work? Well, let's plug it in. Letter D, number 1. Use the even numbered gates, which are what? 2 and 4, correct? When the weakness is evenly distributed. That's even for even. Meaning use an even numbered gate when you have an even number of legs messed up. Use 2-point for a mild problem and 4-point for a severe problem. So generally, answering your question, when do you use 4-point? With severe bilateral weaknesses. When do you use a 2-point gate? Mild bilateral weaknesses. Because if you see, what my point is this, is if they give you a question about what crutch gait will you teach, all you have to do to get it right is ask yourself how many legs are affected. If it's an even number of legs, which would be what? 2, then pick 2 or 4. Even for even. Okay, D, number 2 here. Use the odd numbered gate, and there's only one odd numbered gate, and that is 3. When one leg is odd. That's the odd for odd. So if you say, how many legs are affected? 1. Well, what kind of a number is 1? Even or odd? Odd. So pick the odd numbered gate, which is 3. But if you have 2 legs affected, is that an even or an odd number? Even. So pick an even numbered gate, 2 or 4. 2 for a mild, 4 for a severe. And if they can't bear weight, you go swing through. And if they're an amputation, you go swing through. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I want you to tell me which crutch gait you would teach. All righty? And I just want you to write it down. Number 1. Early stages of rheumatoid arthritis. Early stages of rheumatoid arthritis. Left above the knee amputation. First day post-op, right knee replacement, partial weight bearing allowed. Right or left? Left. Did I say left or right? Right total knee replacement, first day post-op, partial weight bearing allowed. Advanced stages of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. Advanced ALS. Left hip replacement, second day post-op, non-weight bearing. And just write down the crutch gait you're going to teach. Next one, bilateral total knee replacement. Bilateral total knee replacement. First day, post-op, weight bearing allowed. Bilateral total knee replacement. First day post-op, weight bearing allowed. And last patient, bilateral total knee replacement. 3 weeks post-op. Okay? So do you have your crutch gaits down? Okay, what's it read? What's the first one? 2. Why 2? Did I tell you how many legs were affected? No, but it was a systemic disease. And what should you assume if it's a systemic disease? Both legs. So is 2 an even or odd number? Even. So you would have picked 2 or 4. Why did you pick 2? Early. Okay, then what was the next one? Swing through. Then what? 3. Then which one? Everybody's sitting there like, are you just not answering, or is everybody getting 4? Okay. Then swing through. Then 4. Then 2. Did you get those? Any questions about any of them? Okay, good. Just remember, even for even, odd for odd. All right, stairs, going up and down stairs with crutches, letter E, going up and down stairs. Again, it's going to be patient teaching. Remember the saying, up with the good, down with the bad. Up with the good, down with the bad. In other words, when you go upstairs with crutches, go up with your good. That means lead with your good. So what goes first? Crutches or the foot? Foot. So crutches go what? Second. Up with the good. Up with the good. See that? However, down with the bad. Down with the bad. See that? Down with the bad. But it actually makes sense. Because could you go up with the bad? Okay, I'm going to put the crutches up first. Okay, now the crutches are up. Okay, now how do I... See, you can't get up because the crutches are there. And when you come down, would you really lead with your good leg? You know, that would throw... You'd be down a bit faster than you thought. It would just throw you down. So it's always up with the... Down with the... And the crutches always move with the bad leg. Canes. Hold the cane on the strong side. People hold canes incorrectly, notoriously. If I have a weak right leg, in which hand do I hold the crutch? The left. But I advance it with the bad leg. So when you walk with crutches appropriately, if you're walking like this, if this is your bad leg, you're going like this. And see, when you put your crutch down, you have a nice wide base of support, which keeps you upright. When people do it wrong, they hold the cane on the bad side. And what they do is, here's the bad leg, here's the cane, and they go like this. When they go like that, it's a point. So they have to shift their weight over that base of support. And then they rock back. And they go like this. And if you see anybody doing that, what do you know? They have the cane where? Wrong hand. They need to switch it over and walk correctly. So whenever you see people walking that way, they're wrong. Okay? Even if they are a television doctor. Okay. I will correct people in the mall. I've been known to do that. That's why my daughters will never walk with me when we go anywhere. I embarrass them. But I'll go up to somebody and say, interesting, how have you been taught to use that cane? Because I see that you're actually using it incorrectly. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But nurses, once you're a nurse, it corrupts you, doesn't it? You're different now that you're a nurse. One of the things that my daughters also, they won't walk with me in a hotel hallway. Because what do I do when I go down a hotel hallway? Because you do it too. You go like this. You're walking down a hotel hallway and this is you. What are you doing? You're looking in rooms, aren't you? Because as a nurse, you cannot go down a hallway without looking through rooms, correct? So I'm looking in all these open doors like this, and my daughters are going, Dad, stop looking in the room. Well, my response is, if they didn't want me looking in the room, they should have closed the door. You know, but I mean, you can't, can you do it? Can you walk by an open door without looking in? I mean, you may have been able to before you were a nurse, but you can't do it now that you're a nurse. It's unavoidable. Try to walk down a hallway next time in a hotel and say, I will not look in any empty rooms. You'll go nuts. It'll drive you crazy. Okay. Walkers. Pick them up, set them down, walk to them. Pick them up, set them down, walk to them. In other words, it's slow. Yeah, it's slow. No big deal. They pick it up, they set it down, they walk to it. They're supposed to pick it up, set it down, walk to it. Pick it up, set it down. What do? They go like this and then they go. Right? They don't do it right. Okay, and number 2, if they must tie their belongings to the walker, have them tie it to the sides, not the front. Why? Tipping over. What's that? I didn't hear you.
Can you repeat that?
Okay. If they must tie their belongings to the walker, have them tie belongings to the side of the walker, not to the front of the walker. So even though it is done by 99% of everybody you see, Boards does not like stuff tied onto the fronts of walkers. Alrighty? And Boards doesn't even like wheels on walkers or tennis balls on walkers. You see, even though it's done. Any questions about crutches, canes, and walkers? Just a little refresher, because I figured that if you got a question about that and you hadn't had it in a long time, it might throw you, when it's very simple and very easy to master. All right, let's totally switch gears on page 19 and talk about delusions, hallucinations, and illusions. In other words, some psych. Let's talk psych. Do you see where your first point, letter A, says neurosis versus psychosis? I want you to cross off the word neurosis, and I want you to put non-psychotic, so that the statement now says non-psychotic versus psychosis. Because this is probably one of the most important points I could talk to you about in psych. Because this is probably the most common reason why people with whom I work miss psych questions. Because right out of the gate, they turned left instead of turning right. They went the wrong way out of the gate. And the reason why they go the wrong way out of the gate on a psych question is the very first thing you have to do to get a psych question correct is decide, is my patient non-psychotic or psychotic? That's the first thing you must do in a psych question. You must decide, am I dealing with a psychotic or a non-psychotic? Why does that matter? How many think that might be an important point?
Whether you're dealing with reality or not.
Exactly. It's huge. It'll determine treatment. It'll determine goals. It'll determine prognosis. It'll determine medication. It will determine length of stay. It will determine legalities. It will determine everything. So if you don't even know if you're working with a psychotic versus a non-psychotic, how in the world do you expect to get the question correct? And you won't. You may guess right once in a while, but over the long haul, you're going to do horrible. So one of the very first thing you must do, and I want you to start doing it, whenever you take a psych question, what's the first question you'll ask yourself? Is the patient psychotic or non-psychotic? Now let's talk about those differences. Number one, a non-psychotic person, do you see wherever you see the word neurotic, just replace it with non-psychotic? A non-psychotic person has insight and is reality-based. A non-psychotic person, yes,